So let's talk about to-do applications. On the last week, if you remember, we shared how to do a to-do application using vanilla JavaScript without any framework, without any dependency, any plugin, literally nothing. Yeah, we saw how to do it. Obviously, you saw that it was complicated, right? Even just to do simple things, it was very complicated, right? Managing the state of the app is very challenging, unfortunately, still today in 2018. Because of that, today I would like to repeat the same exercise, and again, it's going to be like a time box of 30 minutes, and I'm just going to do the same thing, but using React, right? And please do the same thing again. Do both exercises. How to do a to-do app, how to build a to-do app with React, how to build a to-do app with nothing, right? Cool. So first of all, I'm going to create a new folder called to-do app. Or actually, I'm going to make it even easier. So I'm going to use create React app to-do app, right? And you know what this will do, right? So it will just install all the dependencies to create a React application. As you may imagine that this example is going to be simpler than the last week because we got React, which we know how to use it. I'm going to make it slightly more complicated in one respect, and I would recommend you to do the same thing. How am I going to make it more complicated? Instead of using Visual Studio Code, I'm going to play with the example using a different text editor. Why? Because in your job interview, in your next role, you may not be using Visual Studio. Typically speaking, you may have freedom to decide which IDE you want to use. But hey, maybe you'll be asked to code with Atom, with Sublime, with IntelliJ. You don't know, right? Because of that, from time to time, it's a good exercise to, just for a bit, try different editor, right? And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to use Atom, which I haven't used for ages, and we'll see what happens, right? So I got my project here. This looks much better, right? Because I'm familiar with it. I can zoom it a bit. No, I can't. I don't know how to zoom it. So View, Windows, Zoom. Whoa, that was exotic. Well, anyways, I'm not going to do too many things here. Just open app.js. Here you go. So again, I'm going to change the title, save it, see if it works.
We are listening to 3002.
Yeah, but that doesn't make any difference, right? That's also interesting because the server is not updating anything. Oh, right, I stopped the server. You see, that's my fault again.
Oh, yes.
Right. Right. That's why I recommend you again to do baby steps. So change something, see if it works. If it does, keep progressing. If not, stop and try to fix it, right? You see, now it works. So now I feel more comfortable with the working environment. So now, as we want to create a to-do list, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set some state. I mean, I'm pretty sure on your mind, you know what the plan is, right? So I'm going just to set the state of the component. So I'm going to do constructor super, and then this dot state. So I'm going to create an object. You see, to be honest, I feel very uncomfortable with this kind of color highlighting. Everything is red. So usually in Visual Studio, red means something wrong. Here is not wrong. So it's just, mentally speaking, it's making it weird because I get the feeling that this is wrong all the time, but hopefully it's not, right? So let's just trust ourselves a bit. So to-dos, I'm going to create an array, same as last week, right? So the data model should remain literally the same. So we're going to do title, and then after the title, we are going to set is checked, which let's set true, right? So I'm going to add an element, and we'll see if that works. So then on the view, so the first thing we can do is this dot state dot todos dot map. I got the to do, and then So we want to display one element, right? So one element will be a div. I don't have any kind of auto close tags, which also makes me feel uncomfortable. But then I'll try to do my best. So input type. You remember we did that on Friday, right? It was very painful to do these kind of things with vanilla JavaScript. Now it's very easy. So todo dot is checked, and then that should be the input, and then we got a label maybe. And then it may not be perfect. I'm just trying to get something working. So it will be todo dot title, and then the title will be arrays. Remember that I'm trying to mimic as much as possible what we did last Friday. So last Friday we had a title, important JavaScript topics. You see, again, I don't get any kind of tag highlighting. It's just weird. I'll be honest, I feel very uncomfortable using this editor. But still, that's what we want, right? Because on the job interview, you could feel uncomfortable if they are not using your text editor. Because of that, it's good to, to keep practicing with different tooling. Right. So you see, I got here my title. I don't have any content, which is wrong because I would expect here to have my my to-do element. But remember to open DevTools. Keep it always, sorry, not like that. Keep the DevTools always open because that will massively help you to inspect what's going on your application, right? So I got root, I got the app. There's literally nothing. So maybe I did something wrong here. This.state.todos.map to-do curly bracket.
No, it is a to-do title.
To-do title, yes. But what is the checkbox? Right? I drop a checkbox and right, I see the problem. Right, did anyone notice what the problem is? Why this element is not even rendered? What happens if you do that?
You have to return.
Correct, you have to return, exactly. I'm not returning anything, right? This is not return. Also, do you remember the alternative? If you don't want to type return statement.
One line. And then you have to put it into that line.
Yep. You can add a parenthesis.
Yeah,
Oops.
you can also,
Yeah, you can add a parenthesis, and then, so that means that it will just return that, right? Let's see if that makes any difference. Okay, I got it here, right? I got it here. Right, which is a good thing. Interestingly, it's not checked, right? I said that is checked is true, it's not checked. It's maybe because it's not value, but I need to type checked. Do you remember last Friday we said that if you add a checked attribute, then the checkbox should be checked automatically. You see? I'm getting some errors here because in React world this is not completely true. So probably when we are talking about React, it's expecting just to give whether it's checked or not, right? Hopefully we can play with that. Let's see. Right, that looks correct to me. If I then change it's checked from true to false, yeah, it works. I'm still getting errors. You know what that means? The key prop. What do we need to do?
you have to add the
Key. Where? Which line?
Input type.
Input here. Are you sure?
No,
In the div here, right? So every time we iterate using map, we need a key, and as part of the key, we need to pass a unique value. In that particular case, I don't have any ID or anything like that, so it may be challenging to find. Sorry.
you could add title, no?
Title. I could have title, yeah, but I could have multiple to-dos with the same title, technically speaking, right? So if you don't know what to put there, even though it's not probably the best thing to do, but at least it's better than nothing, just put the index, right? That's it. Index will be 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Right? Right, it's still complaining, but this is also a good exercise, right? Because we should learn, we should read the errors, because this probably will tell you what to do next. It's telling us, hey, you provide checked property, okay, to a form field without onChange handler. right? So it's a very polite way to tell you, please add the on-change handler, right? Because we definitely want to track what happened when you change the input, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to add on-change. You can see that this line is getting quite long already. So if you don't want to get the penalty on elegance or the coding challenge, try to break it a bit. It's more readable. So then on the on-change, do you know how to capture the value of an input when you change it?
On click or only release?
No, not on click, because you can change the value with the
On
keyboard.
release.
No, you.
Target or
Yes, that's a good one, Aaron. So when you do on change, this function will be called every time the value of the input changes. If it's text, whenever you type something, it will change. But as this checkbox, it will change whenever we change the value of the checkbox. So could we do on click? Would it be the same? On change and on click?
It will still be the same.
Yes?
If you just click on
Okay. I'm going to follow. Right. The reason why I'm doing that is because if you get this kind of questions, I want you to be able to argue. If you are doing an interview with me, I will ask you, it's the same on click and on change, right? And you said yes. And then you start typing, right? And you do that. So on click, you get the event. And then I'm going to call a function, right? And I'm going to improve indentation a bit to help readability. Exactly. So on this function, I'm going to call a function on checkbox change, for example, right? We could improve semantics. And then I'm going to pass the event. So then, if we create a method here called on checkbox change, we receive the event. So then we can do console.log the event. So the value is, and then we can do event.target.value. This is an easy way to capture the current value of an input in JavaScript. So let's see what happened on the console. If we refresh, that's interesting. It's still complaining. Yeah, because of the on change. It's asking us to do on change, not on click. But hey, we think that we know that. So let's argue that proposal. Let's use on click instead of on change. So if I click on it, you see, well, right, it's always on, but that makes sense because we are. Why the value is not changing? Why is always on?
because whenever you change it, puts it on.
So it's always
That's
on.
the change.
Yeah, that's the change. But why is not moving to unclick? It's always tick, right?
You're saying that it's always on click?
is it because the click is an event and the value is still not changed?
No, because the on click is before the on change.
On click is before the on change.
So if it's we click on it,
Yeah.
instead of a handle, it's click and
Yeah.
it's on change.
You can change it.
Okay, so what happens if we change it to false?
Still not, I think it's
Before,
yeah.
still false. Okay. So we have to use the on change.
What to use on change? So that may be a good reason. That may be a good argument, right? On click is not the best thing because on click probably happens too early. But apart from that, there is a second, even more important reason. Can you think if there is any concern about using on click from a UX point of view, from a user experience point of view?
I figured when I click on something, it doesn't necessarily change it because I can always move the mouse clicked.
What if you are using the keyboard? I should be able to change the value. I'm not sure if you notice,
With enter.
but with enter, you can interact with input, right? And this is, well, very interestingly, even if I press a space, this makes me feel very uncomfortable again. If I press a space,
The value is on.
but that's weird, right? Because I'm not doing any on click. So React is smart enough to deal with our lack of ability to do things right. But to me, this is In that case, React is too smart, right? Because I don't want to capture the space. This is not an on-click event, right? With vanilla JavaScript, definitely, this console log will never happen. So with vanilla JavaScript, if you create an on-click event and you press space on the keyboard, it will be ignored because this is not on-click, right? Anyways, even if React wants to help us that much by capturing that, I don't think that's a good idea, right? So don't use on-click when you talk to inputs, because users may do click, but power users that would use the keyboard, right? And what happens if you're on an iPad? It's on touch, right? It's a different type of event. So keep it as much generic as possible. You don't care about how the user changed the value of the input. The only thing you care about is that he changed the value, right? Because of that.
So like, when should you use the on-click then?
For inputs, I think never.
Okay, but so when would you do it? If it was a button,
If it's a button,
there's got to be a time specifically when you would use an on-click, because it kind of makes sense on-click when you're clicking something. So there's got to be a time when to use it as opposed to on-chain.
Yeah, we could discuss that. I agree with buttons, it could be more controversial. You may still have the same problem, though.
So what you're saying is we should always basically use on-chain?
Yeah, but I'm not sure if on-chains in a button will make sense at all.
You wouldn't?
Probably not, right? Because on-chains, what have you changed on the button? In the input, it makes sense.
If you click the button and it's got taken you somewhere, that's
Yeah.
the change. It's changing you to a different screen, for example.
With buttons, usually it's different, because with buttons, you used to have a form. So the form has on submit, for example. So buttons are different. I would like to tackle buttons separately
Alright.
to avoid messing up this example.
Yeah.
But that's a good question, actually.
Just a bit, like, when do you use which one?
Yep. I mean, if it's an input for now, let's keep that in mind. On-chains. Right? And the reason why I'm explaining that is because you should explain these kind of things in an interview, because that will prove that you know what you are doing. It's okay if you just do it, but if you do it and you explain it, it proves that definitely you know what you're doing, right? Cool. So let's see what happened now with the on-chains. No errors, which is a good thing, right? And now there are no differences yet. But why? Why the checkbox is never ticked? Do you know why it's always unchecked?
You want to change the event. Is checked, is not.
Yep, correct. This is always false, right? So React is trusting line 27. If it's false, it's ignoring us, right? That's why on chains, we need to set the state, right? Let's do a quick test. So what happens if here I do this dot set state, or first of all, let me get the first to do. First to do equals this dot state dot to do 0. We'll improve that in a second, right? I want to do baby steps. So what happens if we do first to do dot is checked equals true, and then what's left? Thank you, Aaron. This dot set state, and then actually I'm going to change that a bit. I'm going to do this dot state. So sorry, I'm going to do todos equals this dot state dot todos, and then yeah. Again, I'll change that in a bit. Don't worry about that too much. Let todos, so todos 0. So that I'm going to focus on the first one. I'm going to change it to true. So then set state todos. Right? Do you prefer this or that? Is it the same? Yes or no? Or no? Why?
Because to define to-dos,
It would be.
if let to-dos,
Yep.
You might have to
Yep.
it's the
say
same.
0.
It's the same. But can we do that then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you prefer it?
Yeah.
Me too. No? But still, it's not a big problem. Again, you should discuss these kind of things, right? When you are working on it, you can say, hey, we can do that, but we can use, do you remember how's the technical name of doing this?
Shorthand.
Shorthand. Thank you, Sultan. This is object shorthand, right? Cool. So let's see if it makes any difference. According to my theory, now if I click on the checkbox, it should change it. Exactly. You see? But what happens if I click again? Will it be checked or not? No. Why not?
Because it will re-render one.
So it will be unchecked. It will be white. I'm not sure, to be honest. Look at what we are doing. We say whenever we click on the checkbox, tick it.
Yeah.
Not
Set it to 0 as well.
to the opposite. You always say.
Exactly. We don't say the opposite as Norbert is suggesting. So that means that even if I can click hundreds of times on it, right? It's always the same. So we need to check. We need to toggle the value, right? Actually, we don't care about on, off, true, false, these things. Well, it's a checkbox. How many states a checkbox has?
2.
2. Well, in reality, it has 3, but let's simplify it to 2, right? It has 3 because you can default it to nil or undefined. You know, when you want to sign up to a web page, or when you're installing software, you got to type a checkbox saying you accept terms and conditions, T's and C's, right? So by default, you don't get any error. If you tick it, true. But if you untick it, false. And if it's false, you may get an error or like a message, please accept terms and conditions to proceed, you know, this kind of thing. But okay, let's ignore that for now. It has 2 states. Let's try to simplify that, right? So how can we toggle the value of the checkbox?
Check the state first. Right? If we don't if statement.
You got it here.
Yes, but if it's true,
If
then
it's
change
true,
it to false.
correct.
If it's false, change to
Correct. Can you do that in one line without any if else? How?
previous value.
The what? Ternary, no.
Yeah,
One line, I don't want any ternary, I don't want any if else. Exclamation mark. Thank you, Justin. You can do that, right? It's checked. It's just the opposite. If it was true, now it will be false. If it was false, now it will become true. Easy. So if we run the example, you see? It's getting better, right? Baby steps. Don't try to build all these things and then refresh the browser and expecting you to get the eventual result. It's not going to work, guys. So, is there any question? Right, so let's talk about styling. So remember, same thing we did on the last week. Whenever we check the checkbox, tick the checkbox, we want to change the color or something like that, right? So there are different ways to do it. I'm going to do something very simple. Very simple. So I'm going to add a class name. And look, I'm going to use a ternary operator. We did that actually on the last week, if you remember. So to add a class to the div, to the root div, then we can do, first of all, I'm going to add a generic class, so TODO item. So that's the first thing, right? Let's do baby steps again. So back to app.css. Let's get rid of everything actually. So TODO item. Let's add a padding and see if it works. Even a border. Even if I may delete it afterwards. Right? So it works, right? So we know that we can play with the styles. So as we know this works, I'm going to remove the border because it doesn't look really good, to be honest. But then the idea is if the checkbox is ticked, then we add a new class. So we can do that with a ternary operator. We did that last Friday, if you remember. So we can do TODO dot is checked, then, and again I feel very uncomfortable with the color selection, but I hope that's correct. TODO is checked, then add a new class is checked, something like that. Else, what? Nothing, empty string, right? So that means that every TODO element will have the TODO item class, and then on top of that, if it's checked, then add a new class. So as we got a new class, we can do TODO item dot is checked, and then, for example, background color yellow. Same thing we did last Friday. right? So now if we click on the checkbox, you see,
It seems faster.
Much faster.
it's much easier than what we did on Friday,
You
right?
don't have to write so many functions.
Yeah, that's the thing. So how many lines of code we've written so far? So we set up the state, which is the same, but then that's pretty much it, right? I mean, it's so easier now to work with this example. We could even just move that to a new component, make it, separation of concerns. It scales much better, much better, right? So then just a final questions, and I'm going to leave it here. Again, if you think this is useful, I'm happy to progress on it in the future. But for now, at the moment, this is hacky, right? Because, okay, let's add a new to-do. So if we add a new to-do, this is the last thing I'm going to do today. I'm going to build today. So if there's arrays is objects, and is checked is true. So first of all, is displayed correctly? Yes, it displays, which is a good thing. But what happens if I click on this, in objects? What will be the consequence of that action?
The background
Would be yellow.
The background will be yellow.
no
No,
will be white and we have a border.
the background will be white
What?
of objects. Wrong? So what happens if I click here? I'm going to show the code, if that any helps. Ah, that thing, right?
True, it's checked. Title.
To do is 0.
Yeah.
To do is 0.
Yeah, So then what?
So it's
Yeah.
only the first.
yeah,
arrays.
correct. So then what happens if I click here?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing, wrong.
No, it's changed first.
Yes, I think Norbert is right. If my theory is correct, and if his theory is correct,
Okay.
as soon as I click on the second one, it will toggle the first one. Look at that. Right? Why? Because, yeah, exactly. So the question is, how can we solve that easily? In other words, we don't want to pass 0 here.
Want to pass index.
Correct. We want to pass index. Exactly. Thank you, Christian. And right, index. But the question is, how can we pass now the index?
Map,
It's,
map. Take it out from map.
Change, I would say.
Change.
Event.
Yep. Comma,
And
index, because we got the index here, right? Cool. So let's try that. So if I click again, what should happen now?
This
Why is
of course,
we will have white
that
and
was
border.
unchecked.
We have ignore the border. There is no border, Christian. I've removed it 10 minutes ago.
Give it a border.
Right, I'm going to add a border just for Christian. No, let's do it. Let's do it.
Right.
Right, I'm going to add a Spanish flag. Right. So if we do that, if we click here, it should just remove the background on the border, right? Exactly. Right? Why we got this kind of horrible effect, which ruins our user experience?
Notebooks.
Why it's moving?
Because the border with
Border
heads
has width.
onto the.
Second.
The border has width.
The border has width, correct. But what happens if we really want to do that, right? What happens if in reality we want to have a border? How can we avoid this horrible effect? And this is the very last question of the day.
Okay.
So, scale. No, let's
You
let,
have to make it sure that
border box.
Border box.
Right. So what do you do with border box?
You-
So you can do. So what you in your mind, what you want to do is box sizing, border box.
It makes sure that the browser calculates
I
the
don't
size
think.
of the element.
But this, yeah, but that's unrelated
not working.
because the size is already 100%. So it's you can see, you can clearly see the border, right? So that's not the issue.
What about the margin?
Margin, where
There's no margin.
there is no margin. We can add a margin, but this is going
But
to no, it's not
But it
going to
should
help.
work. put padding after border box.
Padding after border box.
What
Padding,
does-
padding after border box. Like that.
Don't do anything.
No, no, no. So these are the typical things that you may do a perfect exercise, you may nail it, but they will ask you that, and you're going to fail, and you're going to ruin the entire experience because you didn't know that very single line of CSS that you need to add, right? So don't do that. Please spend some time doing CSS, right?
Maybe we can change padding to change border to padding.
Change border. No, I don't want to change border to border. Imagine that this is the style that the UX department has decided to go with, right? So we want this style. When it's selected, that's the right style. But the only difference
Maybe
is we don't want the element to move around. We want this element to be like that all the time, right? So when you click, it just changes the background and the border. That's it. Fixed. No. Don't do fixed position. Don't do fixed position. Don't do absolute. Don't mess around with the layout, right? It's much easier than that.
what if we
Transform. No, much easier than that. Much easier. Listen, this is about thinking a bit. If, look, we want to have a border, why don't we have that border all the time transparent?
oh, yeah.
And then when you click, you just change the color of the border, right? It's very pragmatic. So look what I'm doing. Look what I'm doing. I'm moving the border to the top. But obviously, if we do that, it will display the border all the time. We don't want that. So then, instead of red, transparent. And then, if you check the element, border color, red. Right? So if we try that, look, boom. Right? These kind of things are easy to grasp. And the thing is,
Go back to CSS, please.
I can go back to CSS, of course. You see, by default, the border is there, and actually, if you want to explain them, if they don't understand what you're doing, you can highlight the element, and you can see where you see the different colors, right? So the red one is the border, the green one is the padding, and the blue one is the content, right? So then you can tell them, look at this example. You see the salmon color? So the border is there already, but it's just transparent, but it makes the effect, because then when you select the element, it just changes the color, right? Which becomes really sexy. Is there any question?
I don't understand why box sizing is not
So
doing.
box sizing, I'll tell you.
What if we put it into body?
So box sizing, I'll tell you why box sizing is not doing anything. So does anyone knows why if I change that,
It's gonna be the same.
nothing changes? Let me ask you that. Is the box sizing necessary? I will ask that.
It's not.
It's not, but
Not
why?
in this case,
Why?
because you already added the border.
Yeah,
With the same
but-
pixel width.
but the thing is, what happens if I now do that? Will it make any difference?
No.
No. Why no?
Because it's already 100%.
It's already 100% wrong. Look, we broke it. You see the difference?
To the parent element, which is the body.
So now, with the look, you see, huh?
Oh, so that's why you need
border
for
and pattern on top of the actual.
Yeah.
box
So
sizing.
box sizings make sense when you define a width. 50%, 20%, 80%, 10%. When you define a width with 100%, then box sizings makes a difference. In that particular case, if you clearly want your element to span 100%, then is where box sizing makes the difference. You see? Why? Because as it's 100%, then 100% of what? Of the content, of the padding, of the border, right? So here is what you said, hey, yes, 100%, but including everything, including the entire box model, right? Content, padding, and border. However, if you don't do it, if you don't do that, it's okay, because the browser will figure out how to display it. It's not 100%. It's just as wide as possible, right? Without breaking the layout. So the browser decides which is the best way to display the element, which is probably correct, right? Because usually speaking, this is what you want to do. Any question? Does this make any sense? Right? So please, guys, play around with these both examples because they are extremely important. The to-do list using React, to-do list without using any framework. And if you want a bonus, if you want to learn a new framework, you could build a to-do list using Vue, using Angular, using whatever you want. But at least to-do list with React, to-do list without React. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.